Hey, I'm super excited to be back with Mark Brand to wrap up the day. And Mark, as many of you, Mark's waiting for Mark to reconnect here. We're having a little bit of connectivity issues. I'm super excited to have Mark kind of finish up the day. Mark's going to give a presentation talking about some of the things he's seen, some of his inspirational messages. And I'm just waiting for Mark to get back here because we have a little bit of a connectivity issue, looks like. And I will re-invite him back. Looks like he's coming back right now. But one of the reasons I've really gotten to be inspired by Mark is I met him, as I think he mentioned in the first session. Hey, Mark, how you doing, man?
Hey, brother. Sorry about
back.
That. I am.
I thought you're checking out early.
I can hear you the whole time too. I just had two browser windows open and it messed me up, and I closed the wrong one.
Well, so, yeah, we got rid of that echo. Perfect. I think we're ready to go. As I was saying, we met, and I think you mentioned this through Sarah Reversi. We met in New York, and you were cooking. You're basically trying to make a meal with basically no cooking equipment, like no waste of food. And I just saw how inspiring you were in terms of like your messaging around like no food waste, but also just what you do to help people in food insecure issues. And then you invented this entire restaurant token concept that like I think is amazing. I've been telling people in Seattle and my friends, like Mark has got this great concept of help people who are on the streets to get a sandwich. It's just such a cool concept. What I also like about it is so in a way old school, but it's new thinking.
Right,
it's a physical token concept.
Right. And first of all, we met at the United Nations. That day.
Like so you just dropping that. Like that was cool. Like
that's where we were. That's where we met. So it's not a drop. It's more of we were invited to address poverty and inequality through the food systems and food waste.
Yeah.
And so we met briefly. It was like, hey, I know your thing, and I kind of know your thing, and I think we met before. And then we both spoke.
Yeah.
And I was super angry because we spoke, and I felt like in that setting, and this is a good place for us to start. We wasted. So we had 30 individuals from all over the planet talking about really important things. We only had 3 hours together, and we spent a solid fifth of each person's time having somebody introduce them.
Yeah.
It was like, this is so from the X and the Y and the Z. And by the time they got rolling, their time was up every time. And so I found myself carrying all this frustration. And so we kind of went for the jugular in that conversation around like, by the time we finish this talk, there'll be 117,000 people who have perished. You know what I mean? In these times. And so we're just not taking the time that we have together serious enough. So I just wanted to compliment you. First of all, today's been amazing. I learned a whole bunch of stuff and really thought it was great that this platform landed so well, right? To have this many people engaged and interacting. And as my session with Robert this morning, who God bless that guy, there's so much follow-up already with people saying, I would love to learn these models. So
awesome.
Thank you for creating this for you and your whole staff. You guys you're rad.
Oh, thanks, man. And I love how both you and Robert are like, we're totally open source. Like our ideas are your ideas, but we can make this like a compliment fest and pat each other on the back. But like,
I thought that was just nice. I didn't know it was a compliment fest. This is the problem with North Americans, right? It's like, don't you dare say something nice. You're blowing smoke.
I know.
Like, no,
maybe it's more Americans. Canadians are just nice, and us, we're just like cynical bastards down here. I don't know.
Take that Canadian compliment, but I'm sure there's some Canadians here would beg to differ. Anyway. I'm giving praise at every moment I can because every day is literally a blessing at this moment. I heard somebody speaking earlier say, we're lucky to be alive. We're winning against this thing right now because we're here alive.
Yeah.
Right. So to be able to say, hey, I appreciate you. We should do more of that.
I agree. And that's why I actually wanted to end on an up note. Like I said, I've watched your stuff. I've been inspired to kind of hear your message, and I think others will be too. In a dark time, I think it's important for people to kind of hear messages of hope and how this could maybe be an opportunity. So you're going to give a little bit of a presentation.
Sure.
And then we're going to kind of end with a little more conversation and take some questions. So why don't we get you going? I'm going to downsize my face and let you kind of take it from here so you can show your screen, and we'll see you in a bit, man.
Thanks, man. Hi, everybody. This is so different than having a microphone and pacing a stage. So I'm going to do my best here. And what I want to start with is, for those of you who don't know me, I wear a bunch of different hats, but my main hat is that I'm the founder and executive director of an organization called A Better Life Foundation. And it's exactly what it says. We work with upward mobility, so getting people who are facing marginalized situations, whether that be a physical or mental diverse ability, right? We don't see disability because we're not assholes, or you face recidivism, which is in and out of prison and in the system is broken, or that you've been street entrenched or have some sort of issue like that. So we do that. Outside of that, the other things that I do professionally is I'm an entrepreneur. I've started 11 different restaurants, actually just outside this window here in a neighborhood called Gastown that burgeons on the side of the downtown east side. Now, the downtown east side is the largest open air drug market per capita in the world. It is one of the densest areas of homelessness and mental illness on a 5 or 6 block radius, and we operate right there. And so we're consistently trying to figure out the dynamic between showing up for your community and innovating around best practices and systems around food security, around employment models, and those parts. So I own brick and mortar businesses that do that work, both in a downtown core and co-founded a brewery that it's 11-acre farm that works with people with developmental delays, specifically in an employment model to create archetypes there too, and also with sustainable farming practices. So I say that I sit at the intersection of agriculture, food systems, and social justice. So all of that work is really, really important to me. And last year, a year and a half ago now, I founded a Better Life Foundation USA. We're based in New York, but we work on both coasts. And we work in partner with organizations doing the same thing. So we try and debunk the false narratives around poverty and homelessness and provide real hardcore statistics and opportunities for people to show up in the work. Because I think what we've had up until this point is the disparity between business and charity, and then government sitting on another pole, and it's just none of it is sort of woven together. And so best case scenario for us is creating systems where everybody can literally be at the table. So I'm going to share a quick video with you of a tour that I did across the states when we first launched a Better Life Foundation in partnership with an organization called Street Dreams, who are great friends of mine. And this will give you a little peek into what we do. And then I'll come back and we're going to do a walkthrough of some presentation and innovation. And I have all kinds of time for your questions. So I want to make sure that you're throwing those questions up as they come to you to make sure to address those. That's my main focus here, is to talk to you about that. So let's start with this video. I'm going to do the entire screen. And 1 second here. Okay. And let's start with this. The Greasy Spoon was conceived to be the anti-gala. There's no democracy of being able to access advocacy. So you would have the $500 white tablecloth Maserati in the front of the hotel thing, but nobody ever left there an advocate. And the other side of that coin is in the advocacy space, there's no resource to generate. So it'd be like, here's a hot dog boil at the last minute in the park. And there wasn't a space in between to educate the average person. This is what's going on in our city. And at the same time, to be able to bring in chefs to really share their gift on their terms. Seeing the impact of the advocacy work on the general population, from arts, musicians, etc., being able to see themselves in the work, being able to enjoy an incredible meal, but become part of a bigger community is what I'm about. So the events that we did, New York, underneath the Williamsburg Bridge, with our partners, Yo Stay Hungry, who work on education of brown and black people who are in marginalized situations, was so special. And then to skip out to the West Coast and do back-to-back dinners just outside the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and then in Oakland, in the center of gun violence for California. And just to be able to hit people with the conversation, the comfort of saying, here's food, I want to nourish you, I want to feed you, my chef friends, we're going to feed you. Now you're safe, you're in a container. And in that container, we're going to go deep. So that it's an iterative process of what is the South Side of Chicago really need? And who needs to be at that conversation? Who needs to be at the table? And then I will convene them.
So that's what the tour is about. And we are lining up 16, probably more like 24 destinations over the next 12 months to go and convene these conversations. By democratizing access to an event, by democratizing access to information and education, we can solve shit. But until we design like this, it's going to stay the same. And if we can't use food as a transformative way to have these conversations, then I've failed.
So I wanted to share that for a couple of reasons. And one is, man, do I miss people. Like I watched that thinking about what I was going to share with you guys today. I was like, geez, what an incredible thing that we have as people who work in the service industry, whatever spectrum that is, that's our gift. We get to do that for a living. That's what we are. And I just miss it. And so the most important thing we can do in this moment is figure out how to do it better, how to service people better, how to better be in step with it. So I'm going to share another document with you guys and just sort of go through it with you and walk through it with you. And I'm going to go really fast so that we've got time for comments. So I'm going to bring it up. And it's got a couple of just hardcore examples in it of why. I think we can talk about, we pragmatically spoke about how, lots and lots and lots, right? Like this is what's happening for purveyors, for suppliers. This is how people are repurposing staff and products, et cetera. And it's been incredibly insightful. But everything has to start here with you, with why you want to do this and why you want to show up. So let me get back to that screen share really quickly. And I'm going to share this with you. All right. Okay. So I always share, the first thing I say to people when we're doing any kind of work is the most powerful business tool and the most powerful tool that we have as leaders and moderators and facilitators is this, and just understanding your breath. And I think we move too quickly through everything. And this single tool of a deep 4 breath and a deep out 8 breath, and just getting into that and understanding and getting back into presence has saved me from everything from lawsuits to people quitting, right? There's moments in here where if we can define ourselves by being human and taking that step, it's really important. So I get a chance to travel, or had a chance to travel, and will again very soon, around the world and talked about community and systems and what we do. And I was in a place called Kelowna in British Columbia speaking, and I had a particularly terrible day. I'm not one to complain too much, but it was one of those days where we found out that we had partnership issues and a whole bunch of other stuff had sort of hit my plate, and I had a talk to do the next day. And I was walking down the street and I ran into this gentleman. And as you can see, he is street entrenched, and I just unleashed on him. So I come from a background of having spent some time in the street myself and battled with addiction and mental illness, and won all of those battles very luckily due to wonderful people around me, and just the relentlessness and the way that I wanted to see us show up in the world. So anyway, I unleash on this guy, and it's 15 solid minutes. And at the end of it, I'm like, I am so sorry. I didn't give you the chance to even sort of like chime in there. How are you doing? And he said, I'm doing fine. And I was like, do you want to get something to eat? And he said, no, I've already eaten tonight. And he said, but I do want to show you something. And he reached back into a cart and he pulled this out and says, it doesn't get easier, you just get stronger. And why I share this with you is because this is the reverse of the interactions that we believe that we should have with people in poverty or who are marginalized or street entrenched, forgetting that they are somebody's brother, sister, uncle, cousin, and that they have all kinds of wonderful insight, wisdom, and that they're just struggling in some way. And that conversations can be had with anybody, anywhere, and they're always important. And so what it brought up for me in leadership is, what does this mean? What does courage mean in 2019, 2020? Well, what does it mean in the face of this thing, which is that we need to be standing for others, right? But really, the thought is, if you are truly digging into your courage, who are you standing up for? And how are you showing up for them? And so in that exploration, this question always comes up for me, which is who inspires you and why? And I want you to take a beat on this and just think about it for yourself and run as an exercise, because something will immediately come up for you, and you may try to push past that because of the scope of what you think the question is. And so not your Mahatma Gandhis, not your Muhammad Ali's, not your Mother Teresa's, all wonderful, absolutely inspirational, but who shows up for you in this way that's in your life directly? And an example that I always like to point to for me is this guy. His name is Michael Haggerty, or Football Mike. And when we started our journey, I would see Mike out on the streets. This is Gastown. It's right in the center of where our businesses all lie, sweeping up and doing the job that I assumed he was paid for. And it turned out that later he was not. Mike became my first barrier employee. And I say barrier, and by defining that, it means that he had a traditional barrier to being employed. He had obsessive compulsive disorder, suffered from Asperger's, and really hated authority because of being incarcerated from 19 years old. Through recidivism over and over and over again. His ability to show up for us and to really help us literally build every single business facing all of these challenges inspired the hell out of me and changed my trajectory. My investment in him, and more importantly, his investment in me, paved the way for the way that we do business right now. And Mike struggled really, really hard with his addiction, having beat it and become an amazing grandfather to a family that he was estranged from, just showed me that resilience exists in every single place, and that we should never, ever give up on anybody. Mike also part-time models. This is a shot from Vice magazine. And this is another guy who inspired me. So our business in the downtown east side is Save On Meats. This is where a Better Life Foundation operates out of. And I used to go to this business a lot. And the guy in the center there is Al Delorier. That's his wife, 2 steps behind. And we became friends. And I'd never seen such an inclusive place, which is what the food and beverage industry really is at its best. And so Al, no matter who came through the door, would always look after them. And it stuck with me so deeply how he was able to look after his community with such trust and elegance. And so when the opportunity to take it over, when Al was retiring came, against all odds, we leapt at it. And so when we further explore courage, it's from moving from intention. So we intend wonderful things all the time. And especially in this crisis, I think we're making ourselves real promises like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be better at that. And when we look at the systems that don't work, it's how do we move from intention to innovation? And what Michael was talking about earlier is this project right here. And so one of the challenges that we faced in the neighborhood is people would say, nobody cares about folks who are homeless. And I just knew that was intrinsically untrue. That's bullshit. Of course people care. And so I started to ask people around what their issues with dealing with folks who are homeless were. And the number one issue that came up time and time and time again was, I don't trust people who are living in the streets with money, so I don't give it. And that's really the interaction that you have with lots of people. Now that bias is awful, right? It's a terrible bias. But if it stops people from interacting and making a new friend or starting to see the world through a different lens and then moving towards advocacy, then it is real. So we created this, and it allowed you to buy these and then head out into the street, and you could hand them out if somebody asked you for money for food. And the person who received it could come into our diner any time of the day or night and receive 1 of 5 sandwiches, including a vegetarian and a gluten-free option, because just because you are street entrenched doesn't mean you don't have dietary restrictions. And when we brought this forward 7 years ago now, it was wildly popular, and because it was also widely criticized. And I received an email we were opening a live music venue, and I received an email from a broadcaster, and he said, "Are you okay?" All in capital letters. And I responded, "I'm fine." And he responded to me, all in caps again, "Anarchists," to which I laughed and texted back, "Have you been drinking?" And he said, "No, please check your email." And this picture was in that email. And this picture, these two gentlemen had stolen our hand-painted sign. And while it seems funny in the offset, the email that they sent was, "We are going to brick by brick break down all of your businesses until you leave the neighborhood and your staff." Now, the part about the businesses, I'd been threatened before, were very outspoken, didn't bother me. But when it was my staff, I lost my temper. And so I stormed into my office and said, "We are going to have to find that sign and the people responsible," in a very aggressive manner. And my team said, "What if we don't? What if we look at this a different way?" And it was the real pivotal moment in the way that we design and that we show up was, let's approach this in a way that can actually swing things in favor versus showing up exactly as they expected us to, which would be with aggression. So instead, we built this, which is, if you see my friend Steve there holding a bouquet of flowers, his head is where the anarchist would be. And if you're feeling really brave down by my friend Lee's feet, you could also lay down and be that anarchist. So just real quick comparison again, anarchists, Steve, anarchists, Steve. Now, what we said was, for every time you come down and pose with our brand new sign, we're going to feed a meal to the women's hotel, the Rainier Women's Hotel, that had just lost its federal funding. And over that week, over 4,000 people shared this thing. We never responded directly to the people who took the sign, because why would we bother? And instead, we created an opportunity for our community to come down and show up in support of the work that we do. And that really changed the trajectory. So I'm going to stop the presentation there because I'm being mindful of time. And that's the kind of work that we look to do and that we're doing consistently, is how can we engage in ways that allow other people to see themselves in the work, right? To really come to it. And that was the first of many, many. So that program then led us to engage other issues, one of which we're right in the center of right now, which is food security, right? So that word gets thrown around a lot. And what does it mean? Well, the opposite of it is food insecurity, right? So if you're food insecure, by definition, what is that? It means that you do not have easy access to nutritious food for you and or the people you care about, or that you can't afford it, right? So people go to the can't afford. Well, the can't afford is kind of like third or fourth on the list. Having access to it is not easy for most people. So we've done work in South Central Los Angeles. We've done work in San Francisco. We've done work in all these different places. And what we found is the terminology food desert, which I don't like. I prefer food apartheid, because these things have been designed in a way that access is not there for people of color predominantly. How do we create more access for people? And in this moment, we have so much awareness around our food systems, and we heard lots about it today, about what am I going to do if I can't get my avocado from California here in Vancouver? Well, you're going to have to look to what we grow locally. Now, those farmers also have an opportunity to be able to show up for people of community and who are marginalized. And we're working those systems really closely to say, the meal program that we provide, which is it was 1,000 2 weeks ago a day, is now at 1,500 and steadily increasing. What do we do? Like, how do we build the system better? What can we afford? Who are the partners in this? And so we have partners from a farmer on Salt Spring Island right up into Kenora or Nord with Unilever. And we work with everybody in between, because we believe to create an equitable food system, we have to work with everyone. And if the systems are broken, instead of going in and saying big business is big evil, let's figure out if it really is. Let's go in and talk to the people who are working in stuff right now. Now, we know there's a lot of truth to what's happened in our food system over the last 60 years in particular that's just destroyed the planet. But what about right now? Because if we hold that narrative only, how do we find a way forward? So I think this opportunity in this moment has really shown us, and Robert got to talk a little bit about it today too, around food security, like how we can create new programming. So Michael, I think I'd like to invite you to come back and let's chop it up a little bit. I just wanted to set some context before we did that, and hope that was helpful.
No, it was fantastic. And I think that one of the things that occurred to me is how you're applying some of the lessons learned by thinking about approaching food insecure people in new ways, breaking down systems. I think we alluded to a little bit because this is kind of a great grand reset. But how can we and other people apply some of your thinking towards maybe their business models and maybe approaching this COVID crisis and sustaining themselves through it? What are some kind of top of mind thoughts you have?
Yeah, and a bunch. And I think I want to just pin on that while we are open source and the things that we do, every situation is different, right? So I think that we, as we create solutions, I create solutions for a block, not for a town, not for a province, not for a state, not for a world, but for a very specific place. Because every place, as we're learning around food sovereignty and community, is very different. So in my hand are 7 different token programs of the many that have been created because of this kind of work. One of them works with people in farms in the Bay in San Francisco at the Ferry Building. Another one works in Nova Scotia with buying produce per pound, but we've worked to help them understand it. So I just want to offer in this moment, before I answer that directly, that we don't ever want ownership of innovation. That's what got us into this place, I think, is this like, we're holding it, this is ours. And I think it's important to be able to say, no, there's so much opportunity here if we work together, and we're seeing a lot of that. So
real quick, I think that's a challenge for the typical Silicon Valley innovation type thinker, right? Like it's like, how can I file patents around my concept to feed people? Like that's the first reason they go to. I mean, do you think like we as a society, particularly like the Silicon Valley centric innovation type, and I include myself in that. I've been lived and breathed that world.
That brush, but all right.
No, like I'm painting myself with that brush. Like, that's the world I've lived in. Like, how do we get past that? Like, I want to file. Like, the first thing I think is I want to file the patent, right, and kind of own it and make money off my concept. Like, can we as that innovation ecosystem get over that?
I'm certain we can. So I think but I got to live. I went to the D School, the Stanford D School. And for those who aren't familiar with it, the D School has a fellowship program, or had a fellowship program, around civic innovation. And so I came from the streets of the downtown east side into Palo Alto and lived there for almost a year and studied at Stanford and taught at Stanford innovation dynamics and design thinking. And around that area, you have all of these folks. And this is where we've gotten into this terrible place of, okay, I'm going to scale this to an incredible amount, and then I'm going to take an exit. I'm like, that's just not, first of all, it's not sustainable. And there's very few people that are doing that. Why? And I would always ask the question, why are you doing it? And people would say, what do you mean? I want to get rich. I'm like, is that really what gets you up in the morning, is money?
Yeah.
Because if it does, that's fine. But like, can I ask a follow-up question? Why? Why does money get you up? And, sometimes the responses would be, I never had any, or my family was really weird about it. Or, this is my dream because I want A, B, C, D, and E. I'm like, okay, so what you really want is A, B, C, D, and E. It's not that you believe that money unlocks that for you. And when you can start to explain to people that is not why us in the food service industry, and why chefs, why us cooks, et cetera, why we don't focus on money, is because we're filled by so many other things. And the main thing that we're filled by is service and being in service. So when we talk to Silicon Valley types, I'm like, hey, come out and do one of these events with me. Come be in service. Come hang out and cook with me and do the thing. And then just see how that feels for you. And people cry. They open up about all kinds of stuff. I'm like, this is what we're here for.
Yeah.
We're not here to accumulate all the chips.
Yeah.
Like that's not helpful. What's helpful is figuring out what really gets you up in the morning, because as we're learning right now, life is so fragile.
We've had a ton of interaction in the kind of the side comment feed. I want to highlight one. I think your fellow Canadian will be mad. And again, I talking about how whether or not Canadians get mad, I think I'm going to get myself in trouble. But Dev Chef Scott, first of all, had a great comment at the end. He said, "We will move towards conscious capitalism, cooperation versus competition. We can innovate through collaboration." I thought that was a great thought. But he also had a question, which I want you to help him answer. He said, Dev Chef Scott asked, how do you get funding for these projects? Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you sum it up in a short amount of time?
Yeah, I think so. And this will speak more to the people who work in the money world, which is multiple revenue streams, right? So the only way that we've ever built businesses is worst case scenario. My first restaurant in 07, late 07, casual fine dining restaurant. In 08, everything tanked and we're empty. I was like, uh-oh, what do we do now? right? And so we just figure out all kinds of alternate revenue streams. Like, what does it look like we don't have to do a cash grab. What if we created community nights? What if we had all these other things that we could do? And we did all of it, right? And so whenever I'm looking at an ecosystem or creating a business to find funding, what you find is who's really interested. The great part about design thinking as a methodology, and I'm happy to answer questions about it another time, but is that you work to empathy and you work to understand the problem, and all of it's free, right? So this is the building block of figuring out money. Is I think I should open a sushi restaurant. Well, you know what you can do? In that neighborhood, you can stand on the corner and you can ask every single person if they would want a sushi restaurant there. And people are like, why would I do? I mean, I know what I want to open. I'm like, just research. Who needs that? Like, who wants it? So
Right.
when we were doing a meal program, I was like, who needs to provide food? The government needs to provide food. Who else needs to do it? Hospitals, churches, all of the people that need to do this. Does anybody have any money? Well, why don't we ask them? And if they don't, does anybody care about this? And if they care about it, well, then we can get donors. And I'm not trying to oversimplify. That's it. Like, that's where you start. And then you start to build relationships. So in those relationships, this is what I can execute. This is what I'm great at. This is what I would love the opportunity to try. And so as you do that, then revenue comes in, and then you start to say to yourself, okay, how do I stabilize this in a way that's truly in service of what we do? So what I teach people around charity in particular, because I think this is important in the food conversation, is we are taught that with donors or people who have money to just take great soft care of them and they want low friction. That's utter bullshit. People want high friction, hard-working events that they can put their back into and be seen, right? And not be seen in the like $5,000 a plate thing. People still do that. That's unfortunate, but that's not our work. Our work is like, come into my kitchen. We have a thing called Plenty of Plates that may help some folks here like understand how we do these diversity things, like how we have all these different buckets. People would always say to me, Chef, I want to come cook with you. And I'd say, do you know how? And 98% of the time they'd say no. And say, well, how is that useful to me? And they'd be like, well, I'm like, don't come and burn soup or cut yourself in my kitchen. That's 0% helpful to me.
Yeah.
What do you do? And they'd be like, I'm a UX designer. That's not helpful. Like, have you seen nonprofit websites? Yes, it is. And so after years of this and not wanting to manage it anymore, I just said, yes, you can come cook with me. It's a $5,000 donation or $10,000 donation. And thinking nobody would do that. And I'd be like, let's make it harder. It's 10 grand. You bring 15 friends into my kitchen. We'll teach you how to cook for 75, and then we'll serve 75 people from the neighborhood directly. You're going to do that. No training, because humans are humans. We're going to set up menus. We're going to have lights, candles, music. You're going to give them a fine dining experience, and you're the service team and you're the kitchen team. Then you're going to write me a check that'll also feed more than 1,000 more people, and then you're going to clean the place spotless and get out. I was like, nobody's ever going to do this. We're doing it all the time.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Right? So you just have to think about, like, what do people really want? So that's the revenue stream piece. That's now half of our funding.
And you're not worried about pivoting or the new reality. Because I think what you've shown is you're resilient. And I think resiliency is part of the answer here, right? Like continuing to adapt and rethink yourself even through the hard times.
Especially in the hard times.
Yep.
Right? This isn't we don't throw in the towel. That's not what this is about. This moment is so incredibly important. All I've heard today, and I definitely have a lens, but all I've heard today is opportunity and hope. That's all I heard all day.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's enough doom and gloom out there about what's happening. We're all losing people. That's legitimate. This is going to touch every single one of us. Right? We're going to lose people, and it's going to be terrible. And we've got to rethink how we do things. But the opportunity here to cut through the fallacy of the capitalism hamster wheel that we've been running on for 60 years and actually engage is what we've always wanted to do. And when I tell people about it, they're like, that sounds great, but I've got 4 jobs.
Yeah.
Like, why have you got 4 jobs? Like, what is it that you're chasing? What do you want? Right?
AJ was riffing, I think, off of what Chef Scott had said. He said he agrees. In fact, the original meaning of competition as a word in Latin meant to come together and strive together. Consciousness is, however, tough to get resources and funding. He would love to know more. So I guess he's asking, how do you get funding for this kind of maybe more abstract idea of consciousness?
Sure. And I think you bring people to the work, right? So I'm going to switch, if that's okay with you, AJ, consciousness for advocacy, right? So you bring people into a space, and what we say we do is soft advocacy work, right? So if you come to one of my dinners, which you've been to, I probably only speak for 60 seconds, maybe a minute and a half. I just want you to be interested. And if you're interested, you'll come to the work. And if you have money and you want to share it, you're going to. But more importantly, we don't believe in the large donor system, right? So if you are chasing just one contractor, one donor, you've already lost the game. If we have events that allow lots of different people to show up, like that Plenty of Plates model, we also do the dinner model that you saw. That dinner model is run 61 straight in Vancouver, sellouts at $100 a ticket, right? 150 covers. You do the math really quickly. If 2 people don't show up, I'm fine. If I'm in the big donor game and 2 people don't show up, I'm over.
Is it too rough an analogy to say you're more the Bernie Sanders approach versus then, you know what I mean? Like
I love Bernie Sanders, obviously.
Right. Lots of small donors versus like the 10 mega donors, right? Is that a good analogy?
We're a society, right? Like the thought that people are just like super PACs and this and then the other thing. I'm like, you're still looking at the wrong thing. You're focused on the wrong thing, right? So when we started, we weren't like, we should get the government involved. We should get these folks involved. Like, no, let's just build this thing. Our community can support itself. Robust communities support themselves. The money stays in the community. We do the thing. Then we can look to the government and say, this is your responsibility, A, B, and C. And if they don't say they don't agree with us, we're also active members. 106 million people, that tweet that I saw yesterday got me so worked up. It's like, please stay inside like the 106 million of you did in 2016. You have to be involved in the process.
Yeah.
And if you don't like what's going on, you can't just be like, everybody's crooked, because they're not. There's always good options. And if they're not the exact option, you just need to be like, this is the candidate I can get behind. And you can build candidates. It just takes time. Right. So I don't want to get too political.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to like put it in a frame like it's the U.S. politics or anything, but I think at least the small donor concept, I think, makes sense. I want to keep kind of going through some of the comments. A lot of people want to stay connected with you. And so I think one way to do that is through your Instagram and through your go ahead and enter your email if you want. There was a question from Catherine. I want to ask that. She says, do you have any advice for people looking to put their dollars to best support restaurants and food service workers? Any kind of general approach you would advocate for?
I wish we could talk to these folks just right now, because I would ask specifically, and I'll ask this and maybe we can pivot and I'll come back. Like, what do you mean? And do you have local people that you care about specifically? And if you can tell me a little bit more about that, I'd be happy to answer it. There's lots of organizations, and I can talk a little bit more about this to direct experience. Like what we do as a Better Life Foundation is help connect people. So if they come to cause and they are like, food security is not really my thing, I care more about X. Well, we divert them to X. Like, these are the people and these are the introductions. I think there's a really important point right now, like super important, is that bandwidth for organizations like mine is redlining, like past redlining, right? We don't have a lot of, that's why I put my personal thing there, is because my team is inundated with people wanting to help. Like, we're in this moment of everybody wants to help. But by wanting to help, sometimes you do more damage than good, right? So with just the analogy I used earlier about I want to cook with you, and I'm like, you don't know how to cook. Now, we pivoted that to do something positive, but that took years, right? So how can you best be of service? Your dollars, for sure. You've got lots of time. Have a look at the organizations or a bunch that you heard about today and just support them directly, right? And if you really care, like, I know everybody wants to put their hands in the work. We know that that's a fact. Start your relationship with some dollars. Think about what it is that you can do and show up with them. Like, I have a Venn diagram for people that I work with, and it's really important to me. We're doing a book on it right now. And the first thing is, what do you care about and why? The and why is really important. Like, why do I care about poverty and homelessness? Because all kinds of stuff within my own life and then the lives of people I love and care about. Addiction, instability, mental instability, all of those things. That's what drives me and fuels me. So I focus on that. How much time is the second question I ask people, and to be very realistic. You can't donate your whole life. You need to work in some capacity. Maybe this turns into your work, but while you're dipping your toe in the pool, how many hours a week can you do? How many hours a month? Maybe it's 2. That's a totally fair number. Like, don't oversell it, right? Like, just this is what I can do. And then, what is an organization that aligns with my values? And then find out what their needs are. Not by asking them directly, by doing your own research, right? If you find out and you show up on my doorstep and you're like, Mark, I understand by looking at what's going on for you that you really need an upholsterer for these diner seats because the guys who come here wear chain wallets. I would like to reupholster your chairs. I would be like, are you an angel sent from heaven directly? Like,
right.
like, what is it that you can provide to somebody or an organization outside of that if you want to put your hands on, that is really helpful? But dollars are so important, and small amounts. Back on the Bernie, small amounts. I think Bernie wants $27 all the time. Like, man, that's really reasonable, Bernie. That's two people for dinner at my diner. I think you just need to set realistic goals, and if everybody finds their way in that and their passion and the purpose in the center of it, that we can change society. We just can.
Yeah, and you alluded to like the UX designer building the website, the guy who can do upholstery, helping you with upholstery. So it's not always dollars, right? It's if you are a skill set that is like that you can charge premium dollars for, and you can bring that to someone who's in need. Do that.
I promise you. Woodworkers, electricians, plumbers, flooring experts. I mean, you want to help the restaurant industry? We have a huge issue with those sorts of things. Also, like, what is it in kind that you can offer? We work with great organizations that support us in different ways, through technical assistance, through equipment, through donation of product, right? And you just work that in a way that feels comfortable for people. The worst thing that you can do with that relationship too on the receiving end is to leverage it out too much.
Yeah,
I think that we're guilty of it all the time, right? As organizations are just like, you just take as much as you can because you think they're going away forever. And why they do go away forever is because you asked for too much to begin with. Where's that happy space that people can show up in that doesn't tax them too much? And that's the same thing with the hours that you want to donate, right? Because if you do it and it's comfortable for you and you're able to show up in what we always say is your genius, like you're really good at something, you'll keep showing up. But if you do something, you come burn soup and you get a side eye from one of the cooks, you're not coming back. You're just not. And it didn't feel good for you. And it's important that it feels good for you. It really is.
So I will make sure that you get a lot of these comments. Like Chef Scotts wants to connect with you, do something in Halifax. Gail Massey loves this. Scott Heimeninger thinks this is so cool. Lots of great comments. Mario Clark says great work. There was someone who wanted to know if you can do something in Brazil. I know you've done some work in Mexico. Do you do stuff? Do you scale? Do you kind of push your what you're doing outside of US and Canada?
Yeah. So we have ABLF Mexico. We were supposed to be doing a dinner on the border in September, but we'll see if that still happens, to bring some understanding to what that relationship looks like more. I've worked in Panama. I've done some projects there off grid. I work all over the place. I'll be with our friend Sarah in Bologna pretty soon. We did some work in Iceland last year. So I'm always wide open to being able to bring these systems down and help people understand them, and then leave them with the reins and be like, make magic, like what do you think you can do? And I think, again, without being light about this, that we have exactly how you and I started, like reflecting people's power and their strength is a really important skill set that all of us have, and we don't use it enough. So people often seek permission from experts in the field to do certain things. And before anybody was an expert, they just tried stuff, right? They just tried to do things. And I think just giving things a shot without thinking that it's going to be perfect, because it won't, is the best advice I can give anybody without going to a Brazil. Is just say, hey, what are the models that exist? What do my people want and need? And then trying what we like to call the rapid prototype, right? What is the easiest, or the MVP in
there's the Stanford Design School right there.
Right? But like, what is it? So for the Greasy Spoon, we threw one event. And I was like, let's see what happens. We never intended to do another one. I was shortfall about $10,000 for a group we were supporting called Youth Unlimited with food. I needed to find that money. So we did the dinner. I was like, we're never doing this again. I said that at the dinner. I said, we're never doing this again. And 3 chefs stood up and said, except mine. Right? So if you try something and it's not perfect on paper, beautiful things will happen, especially if your intention is for other and for good. I promise you that part.
Yep. And I think now's the time, if you've kind of like been fearful of trying new things, like what better time than like a global pandemic to do stuff? Because everyone's trying new things. Everyone's kind of operating in their like discomfort zone, right? Like everyone's uncomfortable right now. So just do it.
I also think it sets a different benchmark for what's uncomfortable, right? Like for us to go back and be like, you know what, I'm just doing this. Like this life looks different now. And that this could happen to us anytime. There's nothing like, we can't waste any of these moments.
I mean, how I've like thought for most of my life, like we've lived in like this Goldilocks era, like no world wars, and like there's no like we passed the Cold War, and like I've always wondered when's it all gonna end? Like, gosh, I think it maybe have ended. Like, there's always that old saying, like the you don't want to live in interesting times. Well, now we truly are living in interesting times. Like that's what they used to say when like back in the world wars. And so I think so now we're living in interesting times, step into that era of discomfort and maybe take some chances, right?
There's something I definitely want to share with you on that exact note, right? So what we're saying right now is a very North American centric take on all of that, right? One of my jobs was I was the executive chef for the American Refugee Committee for a year. And in that role, my job was to look at bringing innovation to settlements, Kampala settlement and some other places, and under the bridge homeless encampments. And what you learn as a global traveler very, very quickly, what I've always known, I lived in Nigeria when I was a teenager, is that we have this really messed up North American centric thing of like everything's okay until you step out of that bubble and go, wait a second, there's wars waging everywhere. And a lot of them are an agenda that is coming from this side of the world, right? So we have a moment to awaken to all of this stuff and say, we have a bigger responsibility here. So I did an interview with a young lady by the name of Samantha Herrera Ramirez, who's a dear friend and a dreamer. And that means that she's undocumented. She was a DACA recipient, which doesn't mean shit, unfortunately, now. And like many people in our industry, is undocumented and unsafe, particularly in this moment. And so what are the systems that we've built and who they impact, and only when it serves us. So this is a new podcast/video cast that I'm doing called We Get Us. And it launched today, funnily enough. So there's a link in that Instagram post to check it out. And if you want to hear more about the work that we care about and in supporting people in this time, particularly in America, I'd love you to check it out.
Yeah, that's great. So check it out. Mark is an epic Instagrammer. You should definitely follow him. Mark, I'll put that in the COVID-19. We'll put that in the resources link down at the bottom so people can also access that. We're kind of using that as a catch-all.
Cool.
But I want to thank you for spending time and kind of motivating us. I know that it was a great way to kind of bookend the day. And I think I could just tell from like the interactions of people with you on the side links here and on kind of the comments, like people want to connect with you. And I think you said like 10 or 12 people have already reached out to you from the first session. Feel free to reach out to Mark. I know you love to connect with people. So
I sure do. And thank you for having me. And again, you guys did an amazing job with this. I know it's challenging in this time to get it right. So it was such an honor to be around today.
Hey, I figured, why don't we step into a little bit of discomfort and try to put on a full day virtual summit in 2 weeks time. And we did it. So thanks for being a big part of it. And thank you everyone for joining. All these sessions will be available in the archives, and we'll even make some of them available maybe via podcast as well. So Mark, thanks a lot, man.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right, everyone. Thanks everyone. We're signing off for the day, and we'll talk to you everyone very soon. Bye guys.